Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we are chatting about a profession that's near and dear to my heart because I used to be one. And also some of my best friends are still teaching. So welcome Jennifer to the show. She's the author of Teaching with Heart, Lessons Learned in a Classroom. But Jennifer, before we get into your book, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And about me, for many years, I was a journalist. I started out in a weekly newspaper, went on to a business newspaper, and then the demands became a bit overwhelming. I had 3 young kids. I was getting a divorce. The business journal had been sold. I just thought I could not be there at 7 or 8 a.m. and stay until 7 p.m. with these 3 little kids who needed me. So I explored the idea of becoming a teacher. And I did. I started out at a Catholic school, and that in effect worked out very well. And then basically decided I need to earn a bit higher salary and went into the public schools. So that has been what I've been doing now for about 15 years. I'm teaching French. And also I've been starting a business, a writing business, to get back to writing for others like I was as a journalist. So that's in brief what I've been up to. My kids are now grown, so I feel it's time also for me to do a little bit more writing, and not just my book, but other people's stories. So I run a business on the side called Your Stories, memoirs for people who are retired, have the time to be interviewed and get a book done about them.
Oh, I love that. 100%. That is so cool. But what I know, reading in your book, I know that teaching wasn't something you went into kind of, I would say, willingly, even though you did go in, you did teach for several years because your heart was always in writing and journalism. So take us to the path of when you decided, okay, I need to go into teaching.
Well, I needed to go into teaching. I went into teaching actually in the Peace Corps first. I had an idea of what it was like. So I just graduated from college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I decided I would join the Peace Corps and get some training on how to teach. It was middle school English. It was in Niger, West African country in the middle of nowhere. And they did teach me how to teach. I mean, with no resources. It was so very different from what we have here. And I decided I didn't mind it, but during that 2-year period in this remote country, remote town, I figured out that I liked writing better. And I went back to journalism school and then launched the career in journalism. But as I mentioned before, it was sort of after, I guess, about 10, 12 years in journalism that I just felt I needed to find a profession that would better accommodate little children. And that's when I gave teaching a second chance. My colleagues at this business journal were very supportive. They thought I would be a good teacher and be a lot more relaxed. I had been getting quite anxious about the increased workload given the new owners. I had done a great job in with the previous owners, but these owners had a different vision. So with their encouragement, a couple of other friends' encouragement, I decided to try it out. And the job I landed at the Catholic school worked out really quite well. The sisters at the school appreciated what I was doing. The students were learning French. I could still see my kids in the afternoons, get them off to school. I felt it was a really great way to balance working with raising a family. young children. I was home during the summers. I was home during their breaks, Christmas and Easter. It all worked out much better for the whole family situation. And unfortunately, though, the pay at the private school, private Catholic school that I was teaching at was low, and I had just gotten a divorce, and I started to think long term, I needed to have more money to support myself, have retirement benefits, or get remarried. So,
Yeah.
which it could have happened too, but it hasn't happened. So, I decided to go and look for a public school job, and that's where I had some difficulties with the students. And do write about that in the book, about discipline issues and attitudes, and not all the students, but a few of them, and it can change the dynamics of a class if a few students misbehave and are disrespectful. And I hadn't learned how to work with that type of a student because the Catholic school had girls who were very well behaved. So that was something I had to learn, which took me a year or two to figure out how to work with disrespectful students and strategies. But after you master that, public schools are, fine. It just, I wasn't prepared for that initially. And the book does describe some challenging moments in the classroom. And I think a lot of teachers have had these experiences where a student will badmouth them and you don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or a student will, even I've read stories, it's not happened to me, but will hit a teacher. In my school, it has happened, but I haven't had that experience. So there are ways to deal with that type of behavior, but I felt I wasn't adequately prepared for that type of student. And as the years went on, I did become prepared because I talked to people. I asked them how they handled this type of student. I really sought advice and became slightly different person too. And thought it was actually a good way for me to connect with young people who were having issues and not take it personally.
Yeah.
So all of that really did help. Colleagues really were great to provide advice on what to do.
I know one part in your book you talk about the principal. I think it's the principal tells you, or the person that observes you tells you to go observe different teaching strategies. And not every teacher is the same. I know that from my experience teaching. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about you going in and thinking, oh, well, maybe this will work. But then you find out that strategy doesn't work.
Yes. I very much appreciated all that, those going into the lessons. And there were very different teachers. I just could not be the Spanish teacher who just seemed to me rude. But it worked for her at the middle school. And so it was something that I just thought, that's not me. She put down the students a lot and very critical. And that one, I did not like her lesson. So I thought that's something I'm not going to embrace. But there were other lessons, like the history lesson that I had observed, who I keep thinking about him and how he really developed such a positive rapport with the students. He was teaching a lesson, I believe, on child labor and the Industrial Revolution, and he talked about relating it to them. How would you feel if you're at the age of 12, you were not going to be able to go to school, but you'd have to work in some type of sweatshop? How would you feel? And so he personalized the lesson. He tried to make it relevant to what they were going through. And that was really good strategy. Relevance of a lesson to a young person's life, and understanding that they are not the adult, but they still want to learn. And the way he had the tables arranged, it was in a circle. So they were all talking to each other instead of desks all apart. it was one big table. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. There really is a feeling that you're chatting around a dining room table. So I have fiddled with seat arrangements to promote that type of interaction, changing the seats in a class, trying to get them to work with a group, trying to change it to a horseshoe arrangement, the seats. There are little things like that I hadn't had to do in the Catholic school because it was a much smaller classes. There were like 10 or 12 students instead of I was having maybe 20, 25. So, and a different type of attitude towards, learning. But that I love that. I then with the English class, I remember I wrote about an English class. She used visuals a lot and PowerPoints more effectively. Conversation. She tried to get people to open up and talk about a poem. And again, it was relating it to their lives, relevance to their lives, was the strategy that I picked up from those two lessons. And enjoying yourself in class. Both teachers, I felt, were having a good time in class. They liked the students. The English teacher, I think, was getting tired of teaching and wanted to move on within a few years. But she still projected like, oh, this is a good place for me to be right now. Mm-hmm. And so attitude, I'm going to enjoy today and show that. The Spanish teacher I felt did not enjoy her class. But 2 out of 3 really isn't bad, is it?
No, it's not. Now, you said you taught French. What made you decide to teach French? Because you said when you were in the Peace Corps that you were teaching English, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I spoke French. I learned French when I was in Morocco. And there was a job opening for a French teacher at this Catholic school. It's easier to find a job in the world language field than in the English department. So, because there were fewer candidates who spoke French well enough. So I thought, well, what the heck? I will try to do French. Again, I hadn't spoken French for years and years and years. My colleagues at the newspaper said, you're fine. No big deal. You're going into a high school class and you've had French when you were a child. You had it in college. You had it in the Peace Corps when you were in Niger. You'll be fine. You just need to, talk a little bit before the interview and it'll all come back to you. And you'll know so much more than the high school students. So with that boost of confidence building, I thought, sure, I'll try French. And before the class started at Villa Victoria at the Catholic school, I did beef up on my French. I talked to a friend who speaks French. I looked at the grammar. I looked at some books and the textbook, and so I thought, this is okay. I understand it, and it's fun. I like France. I like France a lot. So I have good memories of my year abroad in France when I was a college student. So that's why I did French and did get certified in English, and did substitute teach it for a woman on medical leave. But it was a lot more grading. And I thought it would be better for me to stick with French at that point. And I found another full-time job at a public school with French. So that's my reason to do France. And I'm very glad I decided, because there's all these also programs that I attended to, increase my proficiency of the French language some summers, become more enthusiastic about French, and reconnect with a part of the world that I might not have if I hadn't taught French.
That is so cool. We need to take a brief commercial break, but when we come back, you're going to read part of your book, Teaching with Heart.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you, Melissa.
All right. So commercial. Okay.
People welcomed me, and they knew the pain of the journey that we'd been on because they'd been there too.
Other Parents Like Me is an online community, peer-led, for parents with kids struggling with mental health and or substances.
It's a space that's safe. Feels like I can actually share what's going on.
We offer 15 daily support groups per week and live speaker talks on Thursdays, as well as a monthly expert panel.
We also have a resource hub that has a toolkit. This includes over 1,000 articles, podcasts. There's a glossary with the most recent and relevant terms. And we have a directory that's been vetted.
The overwhelming feeling when we're sitting in a meeting and I'm telling my story and I see others shaking their head, tears falling. You know, they understand this roller coaster and they're along for the ride.
And we are back chatting with Jennifer, a great profession, teaching. And she wrote Teaching with Heart, Lessons Learned in a Classroom. And before we went to break, I said she was going to read part of her book. So Jennifer, it's all you.
Okay, well, thank you. Here I go. It's from my book, Teaching with Heart, Lessons Learned in a Classroom. And it's chapter 1, The Dirty Dozen. I love how my nephew did these little drawings for me. Anyway, so chapter 1, The Dirty Dozen. It had been a horrible first few weeks at Northern High School. My French 2 students were disengaged in lessons that had worked well at the Catholic school where I'd previously taught. They chatted, texted their friends, and copied homework. Anything to avoid learning. But I hadn't given up. The nuns had warned me about public school students. I'd have to create gripping lessons for students to love French class and me. That Monday afternoon in late September, I smiled as I entered the gray classroom. I was confident Megan, Danielle, and Michael, the worst of the dozen, would treat me with respect after that day's lesson. Certainly they would be entertained by a PowerPoint presentation with alarms ringing, showers blasting, and buses whizzing. I had to turn this class around quickly, otherwise I'd be fired or quit in desperation. I spotted Michael, a 10th grader, sitting in back, his head resting on his desk. Bonjour, Michael, I said, approaching him. He lay dormant. I tensed up, fearing his discontent if I woke him. At 1:20 p.m., the last period of the day, everyone was exhausted. Michel, il faut te réveiller, I said, nudging his shoulder. His eyes flickered open. Man, stop that, he said nastily. Don't touch me. That's sexual harassment. Get away from me. Really? He perceived a slight touch as sexual? I withdrew my arm as if I had just touched flames. I needed to reach him in a manner he found appropriate. My PowerPoint might be the answer. Michel, on travaille maintenant, I said. Told you, don't know any French, he said annoyingly. You didn't learn shit last year. The teacher sucked. Profanity? Really? Girls at the Catholic school didn't swear. Should I write him up for a discipline referral? Tell him to stop? Or ignore it? What were the norms at this school? I'm sure you learned something in French 1, I said reassuringly. You kidding? Said Michael. All Mademoiselle talked about was her boyfriend. Just then, the sound of boisterous voices broadcast Amanda and Megan's entrance. Madame, don't mark us late, said Amanda, a dark-haired beauty. Everyone gazed as the drama queens marched into the classroom, its walls spotted with holes and dried-up tape. No teacher had beautified the classroom with posters. Since I taught there only one period, I deferred to the main teacher to decorate it. One Monday morning, Mademoiselle came to class super tired, said Megan, a cheerleader. She told us she hadn't slept much because she had been making out all weekend with her boyfriend in San Francisco. She just gave us handout work on the whole period. Then she sat at her desk doing nothing. She was useless. Why would an adult ever talk to teenagers about her sex life? Some matters should remain private at school. No wonder her contract hadn't been renewed. She wore super tight miniskirts and tops, said Amanda, pushing her desk closer to Megan's. Her boobs hung out everywhere. The middle school principal loved watching her walk down the halls, blurted out Sarah. A few students giggled. I saw her as unprofessional, her dismissal no laughing matter. What are we doing today? Said Amanda, doodling. Probably nothing interesting. Whoa, that hurt. Had these students been this obnoxious to Mademoiselle Bouvier? Is that why she prioritized her private life? Maybe I should do that with my own 3 children. J'ai préparé un PowerPoint, I said. Megan's face glimmered with hope. What about a PowerPoint? Are we doing one? This was a good beginning. At least one person was intrigued by my lesson. It's about daily routine, I answered. Remember we started this unit Friday? 3 days earlier, students had listed words associated with daily hygiene in English. Only Stephanie had written words in French. I'd been amazed until she admitted her Senegalese parents spoke French at home. By Monday, students had forgotten the previous week's work. Other students drifted into class. Aravine reluctantly sat next to Michael, initiating a conversation with the only other boy in class. Michael remained taciturn. Elizabeth arrived, clutching her books to her chest as if blocking entry into her heart. She had recently moved from Arizona. As the bell rang, 3 freshmen, Sarah, Chloe, and Danielle, rushed into the room. The bell always signaled the start of class and the end of talk about teachers' romantic escapades or anything besides French. To grab their attention, I projected the PowerPoint on the screen. It illuminated the room. Regardez le PowerPoint, I ordered. I pointed at a slide of a teenager waking up, his hair disabled, his room a mess. Megan and Amanda continued gossiping. Michael snoozed, and Elizabeth and 2 friends compared math homework. Only Aravind and Melissa gazed at the projector screen. At the time, PowerPoints were all the rage in education, a novelty guaranteed to engage students. On commence la leçon, I said sternly. Mettez les devoirs de maths sous le pupitre. Megan and Amanda became silent. Michael raised his hand. Elizabeth shoved her homework under the desk. They followed directions, understanding a little French. Success! That kid is like my bunny, said Aravine enthusiastically. He doesn't comb his hair and clean his room. My mother would kill me if I left my room like that, said Megan, her blonde hair neatly tied back in a ponytail. She always nags me about cleaning up. She needs to get a life. Michael stared at the PowerPoint. Man, that looks like a nice house. He was living with a foster family after his father had hit him. My heart ached for him. I hoped in class I could help him forget his troubles at home. Prenez un crayon et une feuille de papier, I said, holding up a pencil and paper. Prenez des notes sur le PowerPoint. Blank faces stared at me as if I'd asked them to sing La Marseillaise. Should I explain everything in English or continue to confuse them in French? I'd been trained to give the most important instructions in the target language so that students would be motivated to understand information when the stakes were high, a quiz, a test, a big assignment. Also, students mastered French quicker if they heard only French. Yet these teenagers didn't understand simple commands. Maybe I should ease them into immersion. Take notes on the PowerPoint, I said. On paper, write down words on daily routine. A cacophony of voices bombarded me. That was way too much work. No other teacher had forced them to take notes. Wasn't there a handout on the vocabulary? I'd explained they'd retain French words if they wrote them down. Whoa, they're so lazy. What will make them work? Stephanie majestically walked into the room. I glanced at my watch. She was 6 minutes late. I had to talk to my history teacher, she said. I didn't understand an assignment. Il faut être à l'heure, I said. Tu as un pass? Why do you need a pass? She said, really. Trust me, don't you? During training, the district emphasized the students' social and emotional health was as important as their academic progress. Didn't that mean I could ignore student tardiness? Wouldn't students feel anxious if they accumulated too many lates on their record? Assieds-toi, I ordered Stephanie to sit down. Regardez la présentation sur la routine quotidienne. Prenez des notes. Sure, she answered, taking out a pen and paper. Thank goodness one student understood me, but if they'd had a competent teacher the previous year, most of them would have gotten the gist of my conversation. For the first 10 slides, students scribbled on paper, yay, at last they were working. Yet when they saw slides about life at school, meeting friends, studying, and eating lunch, they stopped writing. In English, they voiced their critiques. Kids in the presentation were too serious. They never had fun. Their school was nicer than Northern. It went on and on. I had lost them. They hadn't penned a word of French for 15 minutes. If I had been a savvy teacher, I might have announced their notes were worth points, enticing them to continue the task. Instead, I wallowed in self-pity, believing they should work quietly and diligently, no matter what they thought of the assignment. They criticized the presentation that had taken me hours to create. It was far more entertaining than the lessons I'd had as a teenager decades earlier, before technology changed the way students learned. How could I, a middle-aged woman who'd not used a computer until after college, relate to 21st century students hooked on cell phones, the internet, and video games? Damn it, why did I work so hard for a lesson that was again a flop? Okay.
Wow. I just can't, that is pretty awesome that was your first experience teaching in a public school. And it's like, I would have, if I'd had a day like that, I think I would have run. If that was my very first day, I think I would have run kicking and screaming and saying, I can't do this. And you did have thoughts that you couldn't do that. But
well, yes, no, I did. All that year I did. And you make a good point. I did think about quitting, and I did have nightmares sometimes about going back. But I did have, again, a colleague who provided such confidence in me. She provided advice. She provided confidence. She would help me. And so I thought, okay, we're going to make it work. It became pretty clear in January, February, maybe, that I did not want to come back. I also thought the district did not want me to go back, but they did not want to look for another teacher. So we just tried to make it work. The second semester of my experience there. But after my contract wasn't renewed, which in a sense was a relief, but was very, it was failure. I had failed. And that was not a good feeling. But I said I would never go back to teach. After that year at this school, I just said, it's just not worth it. I've got to find something else. But again, I went back to teaching. So life is a bit like that, I suppose, right? You think, oh, I'm not going to go back to teaching. I'm going to find something else. And then you think, oh, there's a little part-time job. There's substitute teaching. And that's what I did. Did a little substitute teaching, medical leave, and those schools were better. I felt more comfortable. And then a full-time tenure track position became available. And that's the one that lasted a long time, and I think if I had had strategies that I had learned over the years with this first school, I would have been fine. I did not go through a traditional training program to be a teacher. I went through an alternate route one. And at the time I went through this alternate route program, I was at a Catholic school. So all of the issues that the other teachers were talking about, discipline issue, behavior issue, bad language, I hadn't had. So I did not really take notes on how to address it. I wish I had. But when something is not relevant to someone, you sort of tune out. You say, I don't need this. I don't need that. But at the public school, I did. So I was glad to be given a second chance. Honestly, I think the school that I ended up staying 12 years was good for me because it gave me faith in teenagers and our school system and understanding that there is a compromise. You have to cater your teaching to the students you have in the class. And that I really hadn't learned to do. I had sort of thought, here's the curriculum. We're going to do the French 2 curriculum. Well, if they haven't learned French 1, I now would review French 1 and make sure they have the basics and then quickly do French 2. That was something that hadn't occurred to me I could do. So I've now learned to try to say, okay, you didn't learn this, whatever the reason is, we'll review it and move on. Because you really can't learn a language if you don't know. If you can't say I go to school, how are you going to say I go to school every day with my friend on the bus? You have to know I and go, and then you start building longer sentences. So yes, it was a lot of learning for me. Let me tell you.
How important was it to have people there supporting you, like your support staff, like people going, yes, you can do this, and suggesting, and like you said, in that first school, you had a colleague that really helped you. How important was that to your teaching career?
Oh, very important. I think the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself. You have a department, whether you're a math teacher or science teacher or world language teacher, and particularly with veteran teachers in that school, they know what strategies to use for those particular students. They've taught for a while. They know administrators. They have the experience, and they're probably very relaxed if they've been there for 3-5 years. They've gotten tenure. And those people can give you advice that will save you hours of thinking, is this going to work or is that going to work? Mm-hmm. Particularly in your department. They're teaching a similar, the Spanish teacher, we collaborate, and she will tell me what she's using and programs that could help. I'm using Kahoots and BlueKits and GimKits and these software packages. They can help you learn them if you don't know them. So I think a success of a teacher is, particularly first year, is really dependent on trying to almost have a mentor with an experienced teacher. Just because every school is different. Mm-hmm. And you don't know exactly what is normal. And fortunately, I did have that both at the school where I failed and then at the subsequent school. And that even I had the vice principal somewhat watching out for me because quite a few previous French teachers had left or been fired at the school. So they wanted somebody to stay more than 6 months or a year. Mm-hmm. So they were very kind to me. And, when there were times when I looked exhausted or, had a bad day, they'd say, oh, is everything okay? I say, yeah, I just had this. I say, oh, that's okay. That happens. And sometimes it wasn't related to teaching. It was related to colleagues or something else, But this school worked out very well. And again, the first couple of years with colleagues was essential. Collaboration. I don't know how people could do it alone, honestly.
I honestly don't either. Now, you've worked in the public, the private, and the parochial schools. What are the difference between the three?
Well, I think the public school, they have to accept everybody. And, but they have a lot of resources. They have child study teams, to help with emotional, social issues, academic issues. They have, software programs, computer one-on-one devices. They have, people who could help with any issue. So the resources in a public school are so much more than the Catholic school that I was at. And public schools can cater to students who might have a learning difference. And, Catholic schools sometimes might not be able to. There are aids to help students who are having difficulty. So there are huge pluses with public schools on the amount of resources they have to help students who are struggling. The private school, you have to be accepted. The Catholic school, you have to be accepted. So you'll get a different type of student. The private school that I taught at was an elite private school too. It was only a maternity leave for a year. And that there were only 12 people in the class. So when there are only 12 people in the class, you can do a lot more than if the class is 25. That private school was very costly, but those students get a lot of attention, and the application process is rigorous. So to get in is tough. So with those schools, you can go a little faster to cover material. And the Catholic school is not as costly, but it does still require an application process, and not everybody is accepted. And they can kick you out. They can say this is not working out. So if you have a major discipline issue, you might not be able to go back to that private or Catholic school. While public school, it's hard. You can be suspended, but they are by law obligated to provide the student with an education. So you somehow have to find a solution to address behavior issues or with every student.
Knowing now what you know after 15 years, what is the one thing that you wish you knew at the very beginning that you've learned along the way?
I think I wish I had known that you have to understand your students, all of them, and understand that they don't all come from the same background, and that some of them might be struggling and some of them might not be as capable as others, and to know that's okay, that I'm there to help them maybe not master French, but understand something after a year with me, maybe better study skills, maybe a little bit about the French culture. We're not all going to become fluent after 3-4 years in a language. And I probably did not consider that as important in the beginning. I thought, oh, everybody can learn, everybody is capable. And I began to understand after a while that we're all made a little differently, and that some people will not be able to master French in one class with me, even if they have me quite a few years. But they still should learn something. So I guess considering that we're all different and how the mind works is very complicated, and cater my lessons to everybody, not just the ones who seem to get it really quickly and don't have issues and work hard.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned that you love to talk about is the teacher shortage. It seems like every time I turn around, especially at the beginning of the school year, there's tons of schools still. I mean, there's schools that still have substitute teachers here in North Carolina instead of actually certified teachers because there's not enough teachers to go around. Why is that?
Well, there's several reasons. The one big issue is young people, college people. People in college are not majoring in education as much as they should. or I shouldn't say should, as they did in the past. They figured out they can earn a lot more money, in other fields, whether it's nursing or technology or business. And so traditionally in the 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, a lot of women or particularly women would major in education. And they think, no, I want to make, a starting salary of 100,000. Well, you won't get that 100,000 in teaching, and you'll get 100,000 in engineering. So they think, why don't I become an engineer? Or after 3 years in business, I could be up to, 110,000. So let me major in business and logistics or finance. Or so I think that the fact of salaries and having all these other professions open to women, particularly women, has made it more challenging for our schools to recruit younger people. And a lot of younger people I know who were in my school have left the teaching profession. 2 young people, I guess, in their 30s, in the last 2 years left to do other work because they found that teaching did not provide enough of a work-life balance. They always were thinking of creative ideas to implement in the classroom. They felt that the demands were too great in the profession. So once young people are there, sometimes they feel that they could find a job that is not as consuming as teaching is. And so they leave. Or the discipline issues of kids, if they've had problems with that, classroom management. So it's a big concern, honestly. And the teachers in my state are fairly well paid, particularly if you stay there a while. And I think the benefits, are fairly generous, but in other states, it's not the case. Mm-hmm. So that's where there's a huge discrepancy between states on what they pay and the scale going up in the scale. After 1 year, you get this, or steps in the contract. So that seems to me something that could be changed, that we have better salaries overall throughout the country. And the benefits are pretty good where I am at with the pension, but it's getting harder with the new people entering their pension benefits. They have to stay longer. And, so a lot of, I think, young people think I'm not going to consider teaching, particularly the last couple of years. This year, I know some of my students are considering teaching. And I think they think of it as also a profession now that seems, this year is a little different. No one really wanted to be a teacher, I think, last year. But this year in my class, there are a couple of students, I think, oh, good, you want to. And I think they also that, honestly, if you can succeed, there's a lot of enjoyment getting to know these young people. And there's practical benefits that if you have the summers off. You also, every day is a new day. Every day, mm-hmm. You're interacting with somebody that, is a young person that you can shape them. So there are a lot of rewards if you get over the difficult part of having the students like you. That's huge. The students have to like you. And I think I was a failure because I think the students didn't like me. I didn't like them, particularly this one class. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't learn if you don't like your teacher. And the teacher cannot teach if he or she doesn't like his students. So it was a very bad mix, that one class. But thank goodness not all classes are like that, and I found that to be the case later on.
Now, you mentioned something about work-life balances, which brings me to the question that I really want people to know, what would you like people to know about teaching? Because a lot of people think, oh, all they do is they go in their classroom, they're done by the end of say school gets out at 3:30, the kids are gone, they don't have anything else they have to do. It's just they're there, they can get their job done during the school hours but that's not the case with teaching. So
No,
what would you
it's
like people
not.
to know about teachers?
Yeah, because there is a perception that it's easier than it's a difficult profession in the sense that you're always trying to think of ways to engage the students. And, after a while you begin to get a sense. And so luckily I reached that. I know what these students like. I know what they don't like. I know how to make them learn. But that part, I spent hours and hours creating lessons that I hoped would work. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. So that time frame. You also have professional development you have to do, which is often after school or in the evening. We have online workshops that we can do, webinars that we can listen to, but we're required to do 30 hours a year in professional development. You also have the grades that you have to put in. So grading takes a bit of time. You also have faculty meetings and your department meetings and central office meetings. So you have quite a lot of meetings. You're writing emails or calling parents if there is an issue with a student. But those calls and those emails can develop a positive rapport between the teacher and the parent, because the parent can be there to help you. I feel very fortunate the school that worked out, the parents were very supportive of the teacher. Some districts, they think that the teacher might have misunderstood that person's child, but this district hears, understands that we're there to help the kids. We're there to help the kids. And I'm sorry about that. I should put it on mute. And we'll often say, oh, I'm sorry, he was going through a tough period and this is why he behaved that way. And then the next day, usually they're much better. So that takes a bit of time, the communication with parents. You have observations that you have to prepare for. There's always a paper trail. So you have to fill out a form and then meet your supervisor and talk about a lesson. And then I still get a little nervous when I have somebody in the class watching me, but those observations are required. And so, and then there are colleagues that, you offer help or make sure everything is okay, because it is a community. It's a community that I think when you talk about teaching, they're really very kind. In general, I think teachers are quite kind and caring. And so if you see your colleague is having a bad day, you spend a few minutes talking to him or her about what went wrong, or at home or at school or with the car because it broke down or whatever it is. But it seems it's a hub of activity. Schools are hubs of activity, and that energy is good, but it also can make you tired because there's so much going on. So it's not really a job where you go and you leave behind after the bell rings. And I think some people want jobs where they go from 9 to 5 and that's it, or 8 to 4 and that's it. And there's no working from home, which now is people in certain professions can work from home 1 or 2 days a week. Well, you really can't do that. We're not going back to Zoom meetings, which I don't think in teaching work very well for young people. For adults it's okay. I think you can have a Zoom class, but for young people, it's the social aspect is so important for them to be with other kids, So that is a drawback with teaching, that some young people might say, oh, I'll never get to work at home. No, I have to go into the office every day or into the building. So, the world is changing with technology and COVID. It changed. And, I think that's what's an issue now with not attracting as many teachers as we need.
That is so true. And why did you decide to write Teaching with Heart? Why did you decide to put all your stuff down? I know you're a writer. I know that was probably second nature for you to just think, oh, I'm going to write this book. But why did you decide to write and share it with the world?
Basically, because my friend, a friend said we would meet. She lives in New York, and we would meet occasionally, and I would tell her what was going on in the classroom. And she said, well, you got to write them down. These stories are so funny. These stories are interesting. So why don't you write them down? And I thought, I don't know who's going to be interested in reading about what goes on in a classroom. But I wrote them down because it was fun. And like you said, I sort of missed writing because I wasn't writing for a newspaper or a magazine. So I wrote them down, and it took a while. And I thought, okay, how am I going to tell the story? And I told the story, and it was chronologically based. So I started with being a journalist, and then the big issue came with teacher shortages. So I reorganized it because it was a teaching book, no longer a real memoir. It really wasn't. And then I decided, well, if it's a teaching book, I have to give all this advice. So then I did research on, teacher salaries and the best classroom management techniques, and so that it would be a book of advice as well. So that took a while. But it was fun. I actually enjoyed this book, and thought I like it better as a book that could help people understand the realities of teaching, which include joys, but it also includes a lot of strategies on how to work with certain students, whether you're teaching elementary or middle school or high school. They're all different, and you have to have strategies.
Yep.
And I think if you're doing a program in education at college, they probably do talk about working with different types of young people. But I had, like I mentioned earlier, I'd missed that lesson because I didn't think it applied to me. I was like, I'm good. I don't need this. I don't need to know how to control, Jerry's behavior, because I don't have a Jerry who's misbehaving. They were all
lesson learned, right?
Yeah. So, but yes, no, I thought it was a good experience writing this book, and I'm hoping people enjoy it and learn from it and understand that despite my difficulties and my vow never to teach again because of the negative experience, that give it a chance. Mm-hmm. There can be times that are challenging. The first year someone teaches, the students are going to challenge you. Mm-hmm. They're going to see what you're made of. I'm not sure in elementary school, but at least in middle school and high school, they're testing you.
Mm-hmm.
Not at private schools, I would say, or not at Catholic schools, but public schools, they seem to think, okay, we just want to see if she can handle us. But stick with it and talk to colleagues about difficulties, and year 2 and year 3 get a lot better. Unless maybe some people just whiz through no matter what year. I'm not sure many people do. My colleagues. Takes a while, but that's like any job. Doesn't it take a little while to get used to any job?
Yeah, it does. But I think teaching, it takes a while because you get in a groove, and then it's not like a regular job where you have the same thing over and over again. Every year comes up with new challenges and new things that you have to face because you get a different classroom and a different group of students.
Well, yes, that is a really good point you're making. You get a new class, you get new students. I know some of them because they take French too, so I feel comfortable. But if you teach biology 1 every year, it's different. And then the administration sometimes comes up with new mandates or something rather, or new. It's like, well, what was wrong with the old way? Like, are we now doing this way? We mastered it the old way, but I guess that the old way was not good. So there's all these little changes, and you think, oh, okay, well, I guess we have to do that. But sometimes I question whether they're all needed, all these changes. Some of the changes are good, obviously, like software. We have to teach using technology. But other ones, like how to create your lesson plans, every other year we seem to have a new template, and the old templates seem to be fine. But anyway, but you have to just sort of understand that, particularly with a big public school, this is what the state might be requiring it. Who knows, why sometimes they have these changes. And you just have to find a colleague or two if you don't like the changes you have to follow orders. I mean, you've got to do what they say, otherwise you get into trouble. You don't want to get into trouble. But yeah, you do it with a colleague and then it's fine. I mean, I'm sure some of the lessons that the students have to do, or what I have them do, is like, I'm not sure I want to do this. You do it with a friend. And, I always do it because I'm hoping they're going to learn something. But now we seem to get through things quickly now. If you have a colleague or two, we adjust to the changes they sometimes ask us to do,
Yeah. So our time is almost up. Your book, again, is Teaching with Heart, Lessons Learned in a Classroom. Where can people find it at? I have the Amazon link up, but where else can people find it?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target have it. I have it on my website, so you could order it through links there. But the main one everybody likes is Amazon, right?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I go searching. I just search on Amazon. If it's on Amazon, I put it up because a lot of people, that's exactly how they order it.
Right. Yes. Now it's easy. They're good. Their delivery comes within, like a day or two. It's, I know people complain sometimes about Amazon dominating the world, but they provide a service, I think, that is reliable and easy to find anything. But anyway, I've enjoyed talking to you so much. Thank you, Melissa, for having me. And this has been fun. I mean, it's my first time being on video, and you made me very comfortable.
Well, I'm glad. And so, guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find Jennifer, as well as find her books. But I want to leave you with a quote from your book. And it's one of my favorite things. I highlighted it. And this is we'll end on this. Your earthly riches might be taken away from you, but what you have stored in your brain will last forever. Educate yourself. Learn as much as you can. And that, I think, says it all.
Well, thank you. Yes.
So, thank you for coming on, Jennifer.
And thank you for inviting me.
All right. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you.